Soviet Union, when it managed to kill more people than even the genocidal regime of Nazi Germany. In fact, they were allies at the beginning of the Second World War. They have signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Treaty, in which they chose to divide Poland in half. Half would go to the Nazis and half would go to the Soviets. The socialist parties in the West have all preached non-interventionism and isolationism of their country, that is, not isolationism of the Soviet Union. However, they changed their mind very quickly when Nazi Germany attacked the Soviet Union. So we have to ask, whose interests do the socialist parties truly defend? The interests of the people who they claim to be defending, or the interests of foreign communist and socialist regimes, like the Soviet Union was back then? This is something we must not forget, my friends. Let's not forget the regimes that have killed the most people, because those regimes and the terrible atrocities that they have done must never be allowed to do so again. We must never allow those things come to pass. That is why we cannot allow Russia to win. Ukraine stands for peace. Ukraine stands for nuclear demilitarization. Russia stands for war. Russia stands for nuclear saber rattling. And you can be sure that the Russians would have used nuclear weapons long ago in the past, many times in fact, if they felt like they would get away with it. Fortunately, the Russians still have the fear of inevitable and overwhelming retaliation from the West. But as long as that fear exists, Russia will behave, at least towards NATO, at least towards the US, at least towards the UK. However, if that fear is no longer there, Russia will use every weapon at its disposal. Russia will use every dirty trick. And dirty tricks is something that they are professionals in. It's something that perfected throughout generations, throughout millennia of the existence of the Muscovite Khanate. Because indeed, Russia is not a European country culturally. Russia is more based on the Golden Horde, on the Mongol Empire, an empire based on slavery and extermination, than they are on the enlightened values of the West. That is why every single Russian oligarch and politician has their children living in this supposed decaying West, as they call it. Why? If the West is so bad, why do they all send their children here? Why are they studying in the most prestigious colleges and universities in the West? In Cambridge, in Oxford, you name it. I'll tell you why, my friends. Because the Russian elites are hypocrites. And the Russians are depoliticized. They have no power over their politics. They can't choose, they can't decide, they can't say a word. They can't even call this war a war, because they will go to jail for that. That is what we're playing with right now. An expansionist regime that is trying to expand its genocidal tendencies to Eastern Europe first, true, and then to whoever refuses to fight back. Isolationism and non-interventionism from the West is suicidal, because Russia is expanding and Russia needs to be stopped. And the way to stop them is to help Ukraine and provide Ukraine with what Ukraine needs to finally bring this war to an end. Because to appease an aggressor, to appease a psychopath, is to be on the same side as that psychopath. When somebody commits a crime, they are put in jail. There's no attempt of appeasing them. You don't give them freebies just to make sure that they don't commit future crimes. That's nonsense. What kind of accountability will other countries see on the world stage if they see Russia get away with the crimes that they've committed? They're war crimes, countless. And yet, some individuals still preach for negotiation with this country that has broken their agreements every single time. This is why, my friends, our message here in these rallies is to help Ukraine win. not help Ukraine survive. That is the real deal breaker here. We need to move forward until Russia is defeated in Ukraine, until their ambitions in Ukraine are ended for good. Not to just help Ukraine survive a few more months. Not to try to appease Russia and make sure they don't do it again. What happened in 2008 in Georgia? What happened in 2014 in Ukraine? What happens again and again and again with Russia? When we try to appease them, it backfires every single time. Just like it backfired with Hitler. Why should we allow Russia to become more powerful, become more stable and stronger of an enemy, so that they can attack us later down the path? It's foolishness. We need to face this problem head on now. And this is how we're going to face it. Arm Ukraine as you promised.
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 Fight the jets for Ukraine.
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 Air defense 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 for Ukraine.
My friends,